immediately involved with them.
Okay, this is an interview of Isabelle Seals. It is Tuesday, July 30th, 2002 at the Division of Military Naval Affairs Headquarters, Latham, New York. Interviewer is Michael Russert. If you could tell us, first we're going to start with some basic questions about your name, date, and place of birth, please.
Well, my maiden name was Schoengrund, Isabelle Schoengrund.
Okay.
And I was born in Wisconsin. At that time, my address had been Doylestown, but then that post office closed and it became Fall River, and that closed. Then it became Columbus, and I think it is probably still Columbus now.
I hate to ask you this, the year you were born, please?
1919.
Okay. What was your pre-war education?
Well, high school and nursing school.
Mm-hmm. Did you work prior to the war?
I worked approximately 1 year as an RN.
Could you tell me when you heard about Pearl Harbor, where were you, and your reaction to it?
I had just came on duty that morning, and the head nurse informed me. She said, "Did you know we are at war?" And this was 7 o'clock when I reported for duty, and that was when I first heard of it.
What was your reaction?
Well, I was rather stunned. Of course, being 21 years old, I didn't know what war really was.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got off duty and was able to hear reports on the radio and could read the newspaper, it really frightened me.
Okay, and when did you enlist in the service?
I had applied to the Navy Nurse Corps shortly after my graduation from nursing school. And they informed me I was too young and inexperienced. Now that would have been in probably in summer of 1941. And then after Pearl Harbor, a few months later, I got a letter from them with new application blanks. And I guess I grew up very fast and got a lot of experience in about 6 months' time. So then I applied again, and they accepted my application.
And when did you enter service?
In July of 1942.
Mm-hmm. Okay, could you tell us about your basic training, where you had your training and what it consisted of?
My basic training was at Great Lakes. And I don't remember, I think it was maybe 6 weeks that they taught us how to, basic drilling, not a lot, but we did have to go out and march and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to the rear march and all this sort of thing. And we had to be in, I think it was 10 o'clock at night at that time. And we could have, I know we got some weekends off, but I don't remember how often it was.
Mm-hmm.
That was just for our basic training. And we were given $90 a month, and our maintenance and uniforms.
Okay, did you have any other training, nursing training, or in the service, or did they just accept what you had?
Oh, they
prior?
gave us classes,
Mm-hmm.
and I taught in the corpsman school for a short period of time. They did give me some introduction to teaching corpsmen.
Now, for those that may not know, what did a corpsman do?
Well, a corpsman did actual nursing duties on the wards, took care of the patients. Some of them would give out medications, they would do treatments, do baths. They did everything that the nurses would do.
Did they commission you?
Yes, I was commissioned in Ensign. That was right away when I first went in.
Okay, where were you assigned?
I was at Great Lakes for, I would say about 9 months. Then I was assigned to the NOB at Norfolk, and then to the Naval Air Station at Norfolk. Those were my 3 stations that I had.
Could you tell about your duties and some of your experiences in these places?
Well, at Great Lakes, of course, it was the new recruits. And they were mostly, 17, 18-year-old boys who we had lots of scarlet fever at that time, and I would have a whole ward full of scarlet fever. And it was more, childhood illnesses, and some of them had gastric disturbances, and probably due to nervousness or wanting to go home, because actually a lot of them were such babies yet. And the Naval Operating Base, there was more of a typical hospital work where they had surgery and many more injuries. And there weren't many boys that came back from being overseas that came to the Naval Operating Base. And there were some civilian workers that came to the hospitals. We had 42 beds on the ward. So they were usually filled. And a nurse usually had 2 wards with the corpsman for each ward. And the nurse was in charge and more supervisory type of thing. The corpsman did most of the nursing care.
So you were in charge of the corpsman then?
Yes. So it was like a head nurse situation. But the corpsmen were remarkable.
In what way?
Their intelligence and quickly they learned the procedures and how dependable they were.
What were some of your experiences that left the greatest impressions on you?
Well, at one time I had a ward of German prisoners. A submarine had been taken off the coast of Virginia, and they brought the survivors to those who were injured to the Naval Operating Base. I had one ward with them. They wouldn't say anything. I knew a little German and I tried to talk with them, but absolutely no response. They just laid there. But they were also very young. There were only a few major injuries. Most of them was just minor cuts, and observation.
Do you remember how many there were in the...
Well, I had the ward with 42 and all the beds were filled. I don't know how many there were throughout the rest of the hospital, but that's what I had on my ward.
It said, you mentioned in your interview form that you, one of the things that left a great impression was the admission of blacks into the Navy.
Oh, yes. I was at Norfolk at that time, and we had blacks in the galley. I think they were civilian workers, though. And then there was a newspaper, big article I have at home, where they were taking blacks in as regular personnel in the Navy.
Why did this make such a great impression on you?
Because there never had been blacks as enlisted or in the Navy. This was their, and of course at that time, if you traveled in the South, they sat in the back of the bus yet. And they had separate dining areas, and they were quite segregated.
Did you ever have any working with you in your
No.
hospital at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay, you think of any?
There was another time we had some depth charges went off in the naval, in that area, whether it was a naval operating base or the air station, I don't really remember. But I was on duty on the ward, and my patients made one dive under the bed. And they all knew that it was, you know, an explosion. There were several of the personnel that were killed and a lot of injuries. And, that was the first time I heard a bomb go off.
Were you ever in charge of a trauma unit at the hospital, or have anything to do with the?
Well, I worked in the first aid room. And, of course, those injuries were things that occurred right on the base, or the civilians that worked on the base. I didn't really get any of the war
Yes,
injuries.
right. Yeah. Okay. How about how do you think the war affected your life?
Oh, it made a great difference in my life.
In what ways?
One thing, I had planned to go to Alaska to work, and instead I went into the Navy. So I didn't get to Alaska until about 5 years ago. But I never regretted going into the Navy. I really felt it was a wonderful experience. And it will teach you maturity. And
What did you do after the war?
I got my BS degree, and I worked as a school nurse teacher for 35 years then.
What was it like when the war ended? I mean, were you anxious to get out, or did you want to stay in? Or?
No, I think I went through the trauma of becoming a civilian. I had a lot of adjustment to civilian life to make. And I can understand how what the servicemen go through when they come out of the service and become civilians. A lot of them have many problems.
In what ways did you find it difficult to adjust or have difficulty adjusting?
Well, for one thing, I had been in charge, and when I went back to work, I was not in charge, and that was quite devastating.
It must have been pretty exciting for you to be away from home and to be in the service and be in charge of a ward. And
Well, it was a wonderful adventure. I left home when I was 17, and I went to Milwaukee to go to nursing school. So from then on, just short visits to my home.
the Navy treated you well.
They treated me very well. I think the Navy treats their nurses much better than the Army treats theirs.
Why did you pick the Navy over the Army or another branch?
Well, my grandfather was a sailor. He was in the French Navy. But I never knew him. But I don't know, maybe it was just, he was the only one that I knew that had ever been in the Navy.
Have you kept in touch with anybody that you had been in the service with?
Oh, yes. There aren't many left now.
Uh-huh. Do you belong
I
to any?
have one roommate at Great Lakes who I still see. She lives in Florida. And I've been to Florida to visit her. She's planning to come to visit me in October, but I'm rather skeptical of that. I don't know if she'll be well enough.
Mhm.
You said in here that one of the most inspiring things that happened was President Roosevelt and his wife visited.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
And Secretary of the Navy Knox. It was a miserable, cold, rainy day. We had to put our dress whites on and go out and stand in the parade line and wait for them. And we stood there for an hour waiting. And then they passed through, and they weren't wet like we were. But it was a thrill to see the President and Eleanor and the Secretary of the Navy. It was, oh, I was glad I did.
Any other questions?
Do you belong to any veterans organizations? Or?
I belong to the American Legion,
Uh-huh.
but they don't really like women in their organization.
Oh, really?
So I don't go to their meetings.
Uh-huh.
And there's a Navy nurse organization headquarters in the Washington State, and I belong to that. I've been to one of their conventions in Savannah. That was 2 years ago.
Now,
There's very few World War II nurses there. I think I met 2 in the, and the rest are all, you know, Vietnam and Korea. And you don't have that much in common with them.
now, were you entitled to any kind of GI Bill benefits when you got out
I went to college,
through the GI Bill?
yes.
Okay.
And I got my BS on with that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.